Okay, welcome everyone. I'm so glad you're here today. I am especially excited about this session because I intentionally made the decision to stop just diagnosing the problem and start talking directly about one solution that I have personally seen work. Something that's not theoretical or trendy or cosmetic. It's an employee advisory board or a frontline forum, as I've sort of branded it, because well, I started out in marketing and I really just like alliteration. But in any case, I want to share it with you because when it's done well, it's a total game changer. And so during this presentation today, I want to do two things. First, I'm going to make the case for why now is the moment to think seriously about deploying an employee advisory board inside your organization, why hierarchy alone is just no longer sufficient, and why structured collaboration is becoming a competitive edge. And then we're going to shift. We'll start to get very practical. I want to help you understand what it actually is, what it needs to thrive, and lay out a 90-day plan so that you can see what it takes to get started. And at the end, I can certainly stay on to answer questions, so feel free to write them down as we go and save them for that time. So without further ado, let's talk about why you cannot afford to wait to do anything to heal the disconnection that I would guess is probably plaguing your organization at some level. AI and the speed of information and technology in general is reshaping entire categories of work. And I think it's not as gradual as we all assumed. One of the most alarming effects that I've seen is that layoffs are happening during profitable quarters at the tech giants who are setting the standard, which is certainly changing how people interpret stability at their workplaces, which honestly was already under scrutiny anyway. And then you have the job market. It's a tough one. So employees are staying, but many are pulling back emotionally. And who could blame them? Us, really. We're all navigating rising costs, global instability, nonstop information, and our own uncertainty about where work is headed. So we're protecting our energy. And leaders in many cases are surprised by this hesitation, this skepticism, and general lack of enthusiasm around change. But I think the key here is that it's not a motivation problem. It's a moment where a lot of trust is recalibrating because the environment that we're in has shifted, the contracts definitely shifted, and most organizations just haven't structurally adapted to that shift yet. And AI is going to do what it's going to do. It's going to automate, it's going to augment, it's going to accelerate. That part is not up for debate, but what gets accelerated? Because if you don't have access to all levels of perspective inside your organization, there's no amount of technology that's going to fix you. It is only going to scale your problems. And this is the shift I want companies to start getting on board with. Because the future will not belong to the organizations with the most tools and technology. It will belong to the organizations that shorten the distance between insight and decision, between what's happening on the ground and what gets decided at the top. Because when that distance is short, you're able to adapt faster, you can waste less money, and you're going to avoid preventable mistakes, among so many other benefits that I'll touch on. So if the advantage is shortening the distance between insight and decision, why does that matter so much right now? I think there are four, I'm sure there are many more, but these four forces are really reshaping how organizations operate, whether we acknowledge them or not. First, transparency. Nothing stays internal anymore. Internal memos get leaked, cultures reviewed publicly, decisions are interpreted in real time. And then second, we've all read about it, maybe we've experienced it, the burnout epidemic. Globally, roughly 25% of employees report high levels of burnout. And from my experience, and I wonder about yours too, I think that's probably underreported. But even so, that's not a small morale dip, that's systemic energy depletion. And when energy is low, trust becomes even more critical. And then third, we have this knowledge drain. And I definitely see that in transportation and logistics, where a lot of my clients have traditionally been. You have these tenured employees that are leaving and their institutional memory just walks out of the door. And when that happens, knowledge gets lost and you have these gaps that go unfilled and people start to make assumptions and all these costly mistakes get made. And fourth, there's rapid tech adoption without any human integration. We're layering on all these tools really quickly, but alignment, clarity, and that cross-layer input is lagging behind. So the reality is, if we respond to this moment with more hierarchy and more insulation, more decisions that are getting made further away from the ground, we're just going to lose speed, adaptability, and money. But I would argue if we respond with structured collaboration, we can reduce those blind spots and make better decisions earlier. And sometimes when I talk to organizations about getting closer to the ground and creating feedback loops, they're like, I already have that in the bag. They might already launch surveys, they might conduct town halls, and they probably take pride in their open door policies. And all of these things are important channels for allowing people to say something. But what's missing is the system that ensures that something is heard, so that it's processed and prioritized and acted on. So without any structure, the information will rise, but then it just evaporates. And when that keeps happening, people will just stop offering it altogether. And then you're really in trouble. And I've had a front row seat to this myself. And some of you might have heard this story before from the first workshop I've ever presented, but I think it's worth telling again if you'll bear with me. Because early in my career, I was responsible for presenting employee engagement survey results to senior leadership. And we would collect pages and pages of feedback. And I would go through and identify the themes. This was back in the days when I would like literally highlight what are the themes? How are we going to present this? And the data is usually pretty consistent. And so I bring it to the meeting. We're all crammed together pre-COVID. We're in a room with one long table in the middle with all our leadership team around it, and everyone eyes on me as they're waiting for me to present the findings. And I say, employees are expressing concerns, and specifically about communication breakdowns between shifts. Now that's a solvable problem. It's not a rebellion. It's just operational friction. And so the CEO leans forward and says, can you give me an example of what that looks like? And before anyone else can respond, the operations leader's like, we've already addressed that. We clarified the process last quarter. And just like that, the conversation moves on. No follow-up, no deeper inquiry, no curiosity about why it's still showing up in the data. But I spent a lot of time with those surveys. I had read all the responses. I knew there was a lot more context, but it went uninvestigated because sometimes hierarchy just naturally compresses that signal. And with one confident answer, all the concern can disappear. And that moment made me deeply uneasy because I realized we don't have a way to force insight to stay on the table long enough to investigate it, long enough for it to matter. And it was shortly after that, weeks after that, that I read this article in Harvard Business Review that gave me an idea. This slide will be familiar to some of you as well. So I came across this article about Gucci and how they created what they called a shadow board of frontline employees. And what struck me wasn't the structure, because there really wasn't any like detailed framework or operating manual, but what caught my attention was the intent. Because what they did was they intentionally pulled together employees because they knew they had to get ahead of digital trends. And they recognized that the people closest to emerging behavior often see the changes before leadership does. So instead of waiting for sales numbers to drop or competitors to outpace them, they shorten the distance between insight and decision. And so in my chair, I obviously wasn't thinking about digital fashion. I was in logistics, so I was thinking about like trucks and loads and really unglamorous stuff. But the underlying principle is the same. It's when you intentionally create a recurring structure that connects leadership to a layer of the organization they don't naturally hear from, you improve the quality of input, and better input leads to better decisions. And that can help you anticipate market shifts, just like Gucci did, or identify operational breakdowns, improve cross-functional collaboration, build internal trust, and it can help you accelerate adoption of new initiatives. And I'd venture a bet that we've got 5 of those going on at any given time at all of our companies. And so as the organization evolves, the purpose of the forum can also evolve with it, because the core functions isn't like doesn't have to be trend spotting. It's really just like a disciplined way to connect. Plus, there are this slew of other great reasons to actively and intentionally engage employees. You reduce turnover, greater profitability, higher productivity. We all know this. Increased psychological safety, which leads to innovation. But that is where the conversation usually stops. And I don't want it to stop there, because this isn't just about getting more performance out of people. It's really about building a different kind of workplace, the kind where people have dignity and real autonomy, not just fake empowerment where they're invited to share but nothing changes, where their time at work feels worthwhile and not just tolerable. And this is where I'm genuinely optimistic, and I refuse to move off this position, because if technology really is going to take the most repetitive, frustrating administrative junk off our plates, God bless, then what's left should be the interesting stuff. So problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration. And that's kind of exciting. That's the promise of technology that I think we've all held on to at some point in our careers. And when people are doing work that feels meaningful instead of draining, it shows up everywhere. You go home with more energy, you're more patient, more engaged, more present. And not to make it like super macro, but I think healthier workplaces create healthier communities, and we just don't talk about that enough. So yes, this is about performance, and there are plenty of stats and studies to back that up, but it's also just about designing work in a way that doesn't grind people down. And I really believe that the organizations that figure that out intentionally are the ones that will outperform, because fulfilled people will just build better companies. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I promise I'll move on now. So here's the chasm we've been talking about. I'm not going to beat this to death anymore. And here's my proposed solution. Honestly, I am sure there are plenty more that I just haven't stumbled across yet. And when I do, I will definitely create a workshop and send you an invite. But for now, this is what I have seen work firsthand. And I feel like it's a gateway drug to changing the way things are done and how decisions get made. So on to the practical stuff. If these slides look a little different, it's because I pulled them directly from my Frontline Forum launch guide, and I just thought it was a waste of time to fix the font, so forgive me. Now, depending on your organization and the nuances of your business and the challenges that you're facing, you may want to give your employee advisory board or forum a broad mandate or a very focused one. You might ask them, hey, go out there and surface early signs of misalignment. Or maybe you specifically want them pressure testing a strategic initiative before a big rollout. Or maybe you're in the middle of a change or disruption and your goal is rebuilding trust. Or maybe you want them spotting what's actually working on the ground and scaling it, or some kind of combination of these things. The point is, it's not one size fits all. The directive you give your board, this shadow board, this frontline forum, this employee advisory board, it should match the moment that your organization is in. But, and this is important, it can't be vague. And so that's where kind of like the idea of a charter comes in. So at least for the first go around, this is something that usually the executive sponsor and the leader create. And it defines why the forum exists, what it's empowered to weigh in on, how insights are going to be escalated, how decisions will be communicated back. Without the clarity of a document like this, the forum can kind of drift. But with it, it can become much more disciplined. And that's the difference between like a book club, a discussion group, and actual infrastructure. And then there are core roles that make this work, because this is another place where things can quietly fall apart. An employee advisory board is only going to work if everyone understands their lane. And that goes for a lot of things. Forum members need to know that they're not there to complain. They're there to surface insights. They're representing their real team experience, and they're there to propose solutions. And then the facilitator's job is to guide the meetings, track the themes, make sure insights are framed clearly and shared in a way that leadership can actually act on. And then, of course, you can and must have an executive sponsor. They advocate at the top, they clear blockers, and they're going to coach members on influence and impact. The leadership team is meant to listen actively, respond visibly, and act on the prioritized insight. And then middle managers are asked to explicitly support participation. And I know that sounds like pie in the sky, but if this directive is coming from on high and you really take this seriously within your organization, the mandate for the middle managers is that they protect the time for their employees to participate. And we're not talking about a ton of people here. They can't be a barrier. They have to be an enabler. And often there's a rotating, I have like a rotating co-chair or secretary who will help shape agendas and keep continuity. When an organization hires me to install an employee advisory board, I'll typically step into the facilitator role and a little bit of the executive sponsor role from a coaching standpoint. I'll run the nomination process and handle the back channel communication and monitor the health of the forum and make sure that just the right issues are being elevated and that they're being framed constructively. My job would be to ensure the advisory board stays healthy and on track. And I also usually keep an eye out for successors so that I'm not embedded in the organization forever. But this way, the executive sponsor and the leadership team are only pulled in at critical moments when insight is clear and themes are validated and decisions are ready to be made. Leadership's time, and it protects the integrity of the forum itself. I'm really speeding through this. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice. This is a starting structure, but it's very adaptable. Everything is very adaptable. I think that's the theme. Like, you have to be nimble. You have to adapt these things because every organization is different. And the point is not to copy and paste. It's to build something that fits your organization size, the pace, the priorities. But typically, just to give you like a frame of reference, you're looking at 8 to 12 cross-functional individual contributors. And they're not just like your high potentials or loudest voices, and they're not just from one department. You want a cross-functional team of people who are close to the work and the customer, because that's where insight lives. And that's also where the nomination process gets really interesting, because you can do a lot of fun things and kind of make the applications blind and really truly just pick 8 to 12 people in your organization who seem motivated, who have answered correctly. They may be people that surprise you and they land on this committee, and now you've got different voices. Second, the time commitment. A typical term is 9 months. So long enough to, actually, I started out with 6 months, to be honest, but I changed it to 9 because that's long enough to birth a baby, which I think is symbolic, and also long enough to build trust and see patterns. And it's short enough to keep it fresh and allow people to rotate through. You don't keep the same people on the forum, usually. It's adaptable, but you usually don't. And then meeting types will have monthly or biweekly sessions. And the important part is that they are structured, they are agenda-driven, they are not open mic nights. And so if you get nothing else out of this, you will get people who understand how to run meetings, which is really super important because so many people waste time. And then resources and tools. This isn't just a listening circle. You have to have strategy filters. This will come naturally out of your charter and what you are here for. And it'll also come out of your company values and your company strategy, but you create filters to filter all of the initiatives through to understand what is worth tackling. And usually I coach to create like good, better, best scenarios so that there are different ways. Sorry. I coach people to have good, better, best scenarios. Sometimes you have initiatives that cost something, and that's like, this would really solve the problem, but this is very expensive. Okay, if we can't do that though, here are 2 other things we think that would improve it within a time frame. But the goal is to frame insights in a way that leadership can act on. And then finally, the leadership link. This is critical because you have to build in public. There are regular updates and a visible action loop. And so if insight is acknowledged, prioritized, and visibly acted on, that's when you're going to see your trust compound. And again, I'm just going to reiterate, the important thing to remember is all of these elements are flexible. You shape them based on your people, your pace, and your priorities, but the structure stays stable. The way you apply it adapts. Now, this is a very important slide because an employee advisory board is not magic. It is only going to work under the right conditions. First, engage sponsorship. This cannot be delegated to someone without authority, and I cannot replace this within your organization. There has to be someone with real power who can protect the work, clear those blockers, and ensure follow through. Because if insights surface and nothing moves, I've talked so much about this in my other presentations, your credibility is going to evaporate overnight. Second is structured insight. It has to be constructive, it has to be prioritized, and it has to be tied back to strategy. The goal is not to surface everything, it's just to surface what matters. And then the third, protected participation. I will beat this drum until I'm dead as well. Because if people are expected to attend, but they're not given the time or support, it's just another performative initiative, and no one wants that. Participation has to be protected, meaning managers and leaders understand it's not optional, and the workload should reflect that. And it's not a huge time commitment, to be honest, either. Fourth, a clear feedback loop. I've beaten this to death already, but again, build in public. You're going to have to clearly set out, what are we working on? How is it going? What are we doing? There are all different ways that you can do that, but again, build in public. And finally, leadership buy-in. It's just not optional. It just isn't. So let's say you're like, oh, that sounds pretty good. And you decide to move forward. You want to create your own within your organization like I did. What might the first 90 days actually look like? And it depends how fast you move too. Like how I would suggest too, when you're starting out with this, it's not like this big, huge change management announcement. This is I would position it as like, this is a pilot program. Anyone who's interested, this is what we're doing. Here's the application process. It doesn't need to be this really large credibility building initiative, because the work that the forum will do is what will build the credibility more so than anything else you're going to say. And you don't want to, don't build it up. Just launch it before it's perfect, before you're ready. So month one, you're going to design. It's going to be design and setup. So you confirm your executive sponsor and your facilitator. You will probably draft the forum charter, your clear mandate, your scope, your guardrails. You will run a nomination or application process and finalize your members. And then schedule those first 3 meetings right away. You don't leave that open-ended. And then usually through the application process, there is some feedback collected, but sometimes you can also launch like a pre-launch survey to gather initial themes so that you're not starting from scratch. You have some ideas of what you're going to discuss at the first few meetings. And really the first meeting is ground rules anyway, and just an introduction to the process. Month 2 is launch and trust building. So those first few meetings matter a lot. That's where you are establishing together the ground rules and you are prioritizing what's most strategic. You may have a need to assign small sub teams. You're going to start using those strategy filters and framing tools so that you're filtering insights. You're not being emotional about it. This is also where you will start preparing the first leadership update. And then month 3 is about early wins and closing the loop. So the forum will deliver its first update. I know it says recommendation here, but realistically, it's probably going to be more of an update. And you keep going from there. So when you build this well, and when you intentionally shorten the distance between insight and decision, something will start to compound. At the center, you're going to start to get stronger decisions because they're informed by much more context, not filtered assumptions. And so decisions get stronger, and what results from that is that employee trust can grow because people see their input shaping outcomes. And when trust increases, course correction will get faster because issues will surface earlier and resistance will get addressed before it starts to calcify. So then these small friction points don't turn into big failures. And over time, it creates something bigger, something everyone talks about and every leader wants, which is a culture of ownership. The type of culture where people, they don't just execute directives, they help shape the direction. Because that's the kind of culture that performs and adapts to the times and doesn't need to be micromanaged and wins. How do you do it? with initiatives like this one. And so after this, I'm going to open it up for questions really shortly, but this is I do want to hit home that this is a living, breathing, evolving entity that you're going to build within your four walls, because you can't fix modern organizations with more dashboards. If we could, we would. I'm sure we have all of a million dashboards that we're looking at on the daily. This is really about redesigning how leadership hears. And I would just say to you, not to wait until everything feels perfect, because it will never feel perfect. You don't need a flawless culture. You don't need every single leader fully aligned. If you have that engaged executive sponsor and you have someone at the top who genuinely believes this matters, that is enough to start. And so you start small, you build one visible win, and you let credibility and your reputation of the forum grow from there. And so before I open up for questions, just a few housekeeping things, because in the follow-up email, I'll share a link to the executive sponsor checklist so you can gut check readiness. And of course, I'll include this workshop recording. And then another thing I was thinking about is keeping this conversation going for anyone interested. And I was thinking of hosting maybe one or two small group sessions of like 5 to 8 people at a time, just talking through how you might get started, what resistance you're facing, how to overcome like the practical hurdles that come up when you're trying to shift in this direction. And so if that sounds helpful, I'll send a Google form link in the email. And if enough people raise their hand, I'll send out a doodle poll and we can do that at pick a time. Because my mission really is to get more organizations thinking and hearing differently so that we can all evolve in a much more positive way. And so with that, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions you might have, and I will do my very best not to answer every single one with like, it depends, because usually it does depend. Go ahead, Albert, I see your hands up, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, one question. First of all, thank you for the presentation, a great one. I think you referred to employee boards in your previous presentations, that now it's in more details. My question is, how big company should be, how many employees should be in the company for the company to make it worth? So for example, my company is 100 people, and not majority are working on a front line with customers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say it depends. It depends. It really depends on your structure. What I would say is I'd look at your strategy and your org chart, and I would pick maybe a segment of the business that makes the most sense to convene the first board around. It really depends. I also think it depends too, like these publicly traded companies that are looking for like monthly or quarter over quarter gains, they're not going to be the type of companies that probably have the patience for something like this to create it and to start working. But if you do, then you can. So whether it's a focus area, if your company wants to grow one specific business line, like if you have 10 different business lines, you could do this for one business line. You could do this for, like Gucci did, I think it was really about emerging digital trends. They pulled people from all over because it didn't really matter what department you're in. So I guess the answer is your charter, what you want to get out of it, will really dictate how you pull people in, how you invite people into the application process. So you just need to get clear about what you want your forum to do, what you want it to deliver to you, and then it'll kind of fall in place from there. You'll figure out who makes sense to pull this in. Is it like customer service, ops, sales, probably marketing, like product? Someone from each of those places probably needs to be in it. But you don't need like everything in the kitchen sink if there are like other arms of the company that you're not focusing on at that time. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I have a follow-up question actually.
Yeah.
Do you recommend, if this concept is new to leadership and I have doubts about if they will be onboarded, do you recommend any steps as a first step, maybe to form a group without consent of leadership and then getting some insights and then presenting. Do you recommend this kind of approach, or what's your take?
I mean, I'm gonna say it depends again, but it depends at what level you think the support doesn't exist. If it exists at the tippy top, I would argue, yes, you should do whatever you can to create something like this. Because if the supreme leader, if the person who really makes the decisions would be on board with something like this, then it has a chance. And worst case scenario, what I've seen is it's been in a company actually where I created it. I was an internal employee. When I left, it died. I mean, the company didn't die afterwards. Like nothing terrible happened. People were disappointed. People contacted me. People still contact me to this day and say, that was so great. We wish we were still doing that. But it's not like a nail in the coffin. It's a morale killer. But I mean, if you have that kind of environment, your morale's probably killed already anyway. So, I mean, I'll kind of say like it's worth doing either way, but I'm an eternal optimist. So take that for what it is, but you have to use your own judgment. Where is the I can't think of the word, but like where is the fragmented, where are the detractors, and are they important enough where they're going to absolutely squash this?
Thank you.
Lawrence, I think you have your hand
I realized Mina had her hand up. Mina, do you want to go first?
Oh, Mina, I think you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. I did have my hand, but my question was very similar to Albert's. But anyway, I will ask it. My question was like how to get into management buy-in when I work in a company where external issues are way more difficult and naturally prioritized than internal issue. And because we have so much like the company against the world.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, I work in a company that is a big porn company. So we have a lot of issue outwardly. So that kind of puts the people together. And it's a very big company. It's like, well, very big, maybe 1,200 people. So it's not that the leadership doesn't want to. They just are very busy to outwardly fight to prove to the world that we're a decent company. You know how this, and so how do you get this prioritization how do you get them to understand, and if this at all is true, that this is equally important when it's not on their priority list?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think there are that many issues that are external that aren't also internal. You know what I mean? Like that the internal employees don't have a lot of insight into that would benefit leadership. Would you say that's true?
I think, with the regulations and the laws and the company experience a lot of scrutiny.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the work goes toward compliance and legal actions and stuff like that. And so the employees are really not, obviously their work contributes, but issues like burnout or disengagement or lack of motivation really, it's kind of like the leadership is like, they'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the capacity, we don't have the time to do anything about it. And if they figure it out on their own, that's great. If no, we have more important burning fires to put out.
I mean, that is so like opposite of how I think that, like, because if your people inside your company are burnout and morale is down, like they're going to do a pretty terrible job servicing your customers and in all of those areas. And I would think that would be clear to anyone on leadership team, that is so interconnected. That's like one way that I got from marketing to customer experience to employee engagement. That's how I got here, because I was like, oh, it's all connected to how people feel about their jobs. So, I mean, I would try to demonstrate that to them, but if they don't get that by now, I don't feel extremely optimistic that they're gonna get it now. But you can also frame it as, if you have somebody, if you have an executive sponsor that believes in it, and if you have tippy top, like somebody who thinks it's worth it, you can tell them about the time commitment that it takes from them, and see if they're bought in enough that you can try it. And again, if you just pitch it as like, this is a pilot, we think this is going to connect to all these different external initiatives that you already have the fire engines out for anyway. Like, let's just tackle it from a different point of view, an internal point of view. It sounds like they certainly have enough like emergencies that the forum could probably
They
better.
do. So what we do instead is like I call it, we spread like a disease.
Yeah.
In a sense, we don't make it official. We work under the cover, but we don't get any resistance per se. They're like, good, you're doing that work, but I am a coach. So I don't have a resistance, but the resolution of issues is very, very small and very delayed. And that's why I was interested of this seminar to see how can I get out of the under the cover. And sorry, I took too much time, but yeah, I understand your
No,
answer.
one of my favorite things that I talk about with this work is like, mold can't grow where the light shines. Because if you start shining a light in all these corners, then you can bring everything out of the shadows and deal with them in the way that they need to be dealt with. Because if you don't, they're just going to eat you from the inside. And I don't know how to, I say that till I'm blue in the face. And if you don't get it, I guess you just aren't gonna. And that's that is honestly what I think is going to separate this next like paradigm of work from people who get that and people who don't.
Thank you.
But I'm happy too, Mina, if you want to do like a small working group, we could dig much more into like what your position is and how you might just kind of weasel your way in there.
Let's do it.
Weasel.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks, Lawrence. Sorry.
Yeah, and I put a little thing in the chat too. I know one thing that I've seen is like when people aren't thinking about culture, like retention. Every time you lose people, you have to invest in onboarding them, and that's like time and money. So
Absolutely.
I've seen that as an angle in sometimes with some executives that I wanted to put in the chat.
Yeah, there's a lot of data around that too.
But anyway, I wanted to ask a question, and like I think we think about things very similarly, so it's really cool to like find my tribe. But what kind of traits do you generally look for when looking for participants, right? Because I think there are some that are like cross-functional glue, like some of like the smartest people at companies, but may necessarily not be the most emotionally intelligent. And so I was curious for like, do you have like a rubric, or like how do you evaluate across the business, like, and have sort of autonomy to make that decision when like some people might want to put certain like plants in the room, or like people that are going to speak highly of the org on purpose. So I was curious how you move through that.
I advocate for a blind nomination process. So if you fit like the checkbox of the attributes that we're looking for, you can submit your application, and there's a way you can do it via Google Forms where you can hide who it is that is submitting the application. And I put open-ended questions on there. And you bring up a really good point that there are just different types of people within organizations. There are introverts and extroverts. There are people who don't feel comfortable speaking up in meetings, but might have really, really deep thoughts. And there are people who will take the whole meeting talking about like word salad. And so you just can't tell. But I kind of think like the great equalizer is just like quality of the long form responses that I see. And I really just judge on that. And if you take the person's name out of it, sometimes you have to leave their department because you do want to like have this cross-functional thing going on. But yeah, I don't let people plant though. That's a no-no. And I think one like really unexpected benefit that's been super cool is that you'll have people land on this committee that you've never talked to before, and you've never heard them speak in a meeting before. And you're like, oh my God, I like never even been exposed to that person. I didn't think they had anything to say. And you'll find these unexpected leaders, because the people who are interested in being on the committee, like probably think like we do in the first place. But it's a really great way. Like when I facilitate, I can tell, like who's going to be the future leader of this company, and like let's like flag that right now. It's just it's another great benefit of something like this.
Cool, thank you.
But so blind, I'd say go blind, and I can definitely coach you how to do that. I'm sorry, don't know how to say that. Is it Shruti?
Yeah, Ali, thank you so
Hi.
much for this opportunity. Hi. So basically, my question is similar to somehow related what Lawrence has asked, but it is also something different as well. My question is, there are two processes. Like one, how do you articulate your thoughts in corporate from mind to mouth? First and second, as I believe I'm the youngest one here, and I'm working in a startup where I really want to grow and take it to the higher positions, and how to give your better output in the organization as well, where you are learning and you want to go on a leadership position. Like what thought process, as you mentioned right now, the leadership, they also have a thought process in themselves that we want to go somewhere and we have to think in that position, in that thought process of working area. So this question is something different, but yeah, I wanted to take your thought approach in terms of how to articulate your thoughts in the organization, where you really want to say something and want other people to listen and understand how we can portray it and how they are taking it as in terms of result in leadership roles. Second, how we can give our better outputs in the organization. So it would be great if you could answer me.
Yeah, and tell me if I take your question in the right direction. But I think what you're asking is like about a very soft skill, which is how you frame these things so that leadership will listen. And it is such a soft skill. And I feel like there was a point when I was convening my first employee advisory board where I realized that was like a strong suit of mine. Was I had sat at the leadership table, and so I knew what their discussions were. I knew what they cared about. I knew how they talked. But I ate lunch with the people who were on the front lines and love them just as much. And so I would say that that's where a good facilitator is key, because you do need someone who is going to be able to take the insights and coach people to say, okay, but if you're in the shoes of an executive and they care about X, Y, and Z, like how are we framing that so that they can hear us? Like what kind of investigation do we need to conduct? What kind of evidence do we need to collect so that they can get on board with this? So it really is like it's such a soft skill. It's such a thing that you have to coach towards. But I would just say that is where a facilitator is absolutely key in making this work. Sometimes you can find that gem inside your company and they'll raise their hand and do it. Sometimes you need to bring in somebody from the outside, and then hopefully they can identify someone who can keep the work going. But that is the role I would say of a really good facilitator, is like this political back channeling that you kind of have to do. Like, hey, they're investigating these issues and this is what's going to come up, and we're going to give you a good, better, best. Just be thinking about that. And then going to the committee and saying, like, you really need to frame this in a way that's going to make them care. And that is because their responsibilities are so vastly different from yours. One thing that I have seen as another great unintended consequence is that it helps the people on the ground think more like the people that leadership, and it helps leadership understand much more what the people on the ground are dealing with. And so, like, yes, it's a communication bridge, but it also like builds this kind of like empathy bridge too, where people can start like getting into other people's shoes more easily. And that's just another, I think, like amazing magical benefit of doing something like this, and why I think it's so worthwhile. But hopefully that answers your question. And it depends.
Fine. So basically, for example, if I am new to the organization and I'm not able to, as a corporate employee, able to articulate my thoughts to the organization. So your tip on that, like how as an individual or the youngest person in the organization can work on that.
I mean, that's out, I feel like a question outside of something like an employee advisory board that's already been asked to report back
Yes.
to the organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we take that, we can take that conversation offline, because I think what you're asking is
Sure,
really
sure.
just like, yeah,
It's different
as a
outside
younger
the box.
person,
Yes.
yeah, to like start
Yes.
getting respect and get your ideas out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering all the questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Besides, sure.
Anyone else have any questions before you wrap? And remember, I will send out a link if you want to have a small group discussion where we can like really work through some of these things, and try to get some of this in practice within your organizations. Be great. Okay. Well, with that, I will wrap up. Check your inbox for all the things that I mentioned. I'll send out. And thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. And let's invite in this new movement. let's get this started. So thank you so much.